right, I think we are started. I am using, looks like we've started using OBS again, and we're going to cover a few news stories. So if I screw up a few times, it's because I'm an idiot and I'm not used to using OBS as opposed to the Hangouts window, which is a little more user-friendly, but you can't do much with it. You can't hear any volume. Let's start off in the great state of New Jersey, where a great story is rocking this country. Was my mic off? Can't. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I forgot to turn my mic back on. I put it. Sorry. So the next story, you can tell I'm new at this. So using OBS, you kind of you turn the mic off when you have to put video on. So what I was talking about was this new Daily Wire article. Well, it's actually I think from last Thursday or something, May 2nd. And in this article, Apu is basically the object, and I'll tell you about the Ben Shapiro thing that I was talking about in the meantime, which you guys didn't hear any of because I was obviously not being heard because I turned the microphone off. So The Simpsons creator Matt Groening has become a warrior against political correctness by his refusal to shelve the beloved character Apu in the face of SJWs shrieking that the fictional Quickie Mart owner perpetuates Indian stereotypes. The movement to kill Apu began with documentary filmmaker Hari Kondabolu, who actually spent his own time and money to create a full-length film about how the character perpetuates Southeast Asian stereotypes and is. It should be South Asian, by the way. So this guy made a mistake in this article. Southeast Asia would be like Vietnam or Indonesia. So perpetuate Southeast Asian stereotypes and is harmful to society. Rather than cave to the social justice mob, The Simpsons creator Matt Groening essentially flipped Kondabolu the bird in a recent episode depicting the show's most progressive character, Lisa, telling the critics to take their outrage elsewhere. The gesture from Groening deeply angered the SJWs, and they have been out for blood since. Speaking with USA Today, Groening said he will not shelve Apu and castigated his critics for expressing phony outrage. Groening says, "I'm proud of what we do on the show, and I think it is a time in our culture where people love to pretend they're offended." Let me just check this. Enter GQ writer Joshua Rivera, who laments that Groening's response represents the height of willful ignorance, and has called upon his SJW brethren to prevent Groening from escaping their tortures and pitchforks. The mob will go on. Some of the blame for this should be laid at the feet of actor Hank Azaria, who provides the voice for Apu. Appearing on the Stephen Colbert Show recently, Azaria caved to the mob's demands, saying he would step aside from voicing Apu if it were the right thing to do. This not only threw fuel on the mob's fire, it also threw Groening, the man who turned Azaria into a multi-million-dollar household name, under the bus, so writers like Joshua Rivera can hit the reverse a few times. Now that the activists know they can drive a wedge of division between the Simpsons talent and Matt Groening, they will not relent. Rivera advised the mob not to let the Apu controversy go, because that's what every shitty person in the world wants, from that dude who stiffs you on their portion of the tab to Donald John Trump. That's what lets them continue to be shitty. I don't know what that has to do. It's they're equating this with every daily indignation that somebody has to go through. Writes Rivera, for Groening to dismiss a considered piece of criticism as thorough and affectionate as the problem with Apu, with a hand-wavy, people love to pretend they're offended, is the height of willful ignorance, the sort that has been wielded as a cudgel against women and people of color who have the temerity to speak out and criticize the often white and male cultural institutions that have long ceased to earn their keep. Rivera then implies that The Simpsons has grown tired and may very well be headed to the guillotine if it does not woke itself up to 2018. No one needs The Simpsons, he wrote. It is not the pipeline for comedic talent it once was. It does not contribute to any conversation, nor is it a platform that gives itself over to exciting and new diverse voices. So I would say that this is pretty much, these are people who have never created anything in their lives that amused anybody. I don't know how many people saw this documentary about Apu, but it probably pales in comparison to any of the people that have seen or enjoyed The Simpsons. Let me just drop the camera out of here. Yeah. See, you can see into the future there. See into the world of tomorrow. Right? That's what you get with OBS. In other words, if a show has no stock value in the whole bank, then off with its head, as Rivera states. Anyone who objects should be written off as a shitty person. As I've noticed previously, one thing that the critics miss about Apu is that he is not presented as a dumb Indian immigrant who runs the Quickie Mart. In fact, many episodes have spent time developing his complexity as a character throughout the show's 3-decade run. He holds a PhD in computer science, graduated at the top of his class from Caltech, or Calcutta Technical Institute, and only runs the Quickie Mart because of the joy it brings him to spend time with friends and customers. Now, this guy takes a few shots at the white patriarchy, but if you look at GQ covers from, let's say, let's just type in GQ covers. You just have, you have Leo, you have, this is Channing Tatum. I forgot this guy's name. Oh, it's David Beckham. It says right there. Matt Damon. You have Tom Hiddleston. That's, what's his name? Ryan Reynolds, I think that is. You have Stephen Colbert. You have Kanye West here, so that's not a white man. Drake, who's a black Jewish man. So you have this is a men's magazine. So it's mostly white men. Here you even have Louis C.K. Most people would never think of Louis C.K. as GQ magazine material. When I was a kid, if you picked up GQ magazine, the bottom of the barrel would probably be Shia LaBeouf. Here you have Barack Obama. Occasionally you'll have a woman on it. That is Gal Gadot. Lana Del Rey. So the idea that this is a magazine that actually represents something that is revolutionary, that expresses progressivism, that's not the way that I see I don't see the GQ as being like that, but increasingly since especially before the 2016 election. Hold on. So since the 2016 election and probably before that, GQ has become increasingly political, and that's what happened with a lot of the media here in the U.S. It used to be more for entertainment. You had, for example, a lot of these shows on Netflix got a little more political. Like what's that show? The one with the female prisoners. Um, Orange is the New Black. And then you would have, you just get rid of these updates. Then you had magazines like Esquire, which is another. It's almost the same as GQ. They've become more political. Here you have them blatantly. This is an article that would never have appeared in GQ back in the day. I remember when GQ, or it might have been Esquire, so I might be mixing up the two. They were running stories about how the Hilton sisters, Paris and I think Nikki Hilton. I think there's a Nikki Hilton. I don't remember. So they had like a rival hotel heiress sister pair called the Marriott sisters. They were talking about how bitchy and entitled they were, and they followed them around for like a day. It was that was in 2000. I want to say 2003. That's when I was reading Esquire. That was when I was probably 16 or 17 years old. Those were the magazines back at the time. Now they'll probably tell you, oh, we've evolved in terms of our content and in terms of our beliefs or whatever. No, the fact of the matter is that their editorial staff has evolved, and they've merely they've joined the rest of the herd, and there's nothing special about those magazines anymore. Part of the magazine is devoted to men's fashion, but the substance part of the magazine is devoted to political, bullshit. And it's the same issue that has happened with, I think you could say, what's that guy's name? Keith Olbermann was hired by GQ to produce all of those videos after the election. And you would just see him raging at the camera and shouting about how the latest week shows that the country has basically gone to the shitter. And then eventually, when it got too ridiculous and people were making fun of him, maybe we can bring up one of these videos. Because since I can already, I can just feature the sound. So let's see, Keith Olbermann. Let me see if, okay.
I am confident now, even more so than I have been throughout the last year, that this nightmare presidency of Donald John Trump will end prematurely and end soon, and I am thus also confident that this is the correct moment to end this series of commentaries. The important stuff first. There are 7 routes in front of Trump. Each inevitably ends in his impeachment or resignation. The first, the likeliest, became 1,000 times more likely with the Thanksgiving news of a possible deal between Robert Mueller and General Michael Flynn. As I reported here as long...
So this was in November, and he thought because of a plea deal between Michael Flynn and Robert Mueller, where Flynn would plead guilty, which is now likely to be thrown out of court based on all the information. He thought, I'm not going to wait for this to actually happen. I'm just going to quit my job and not do anything. I'm just going to let this simmer on the stove. Yeah, that was his attitude.
Ago is April 4th. The most specifically qualified expert alive on the subject of prosecuting a president, my friend, the Nixon White House counsel John Dean, put it to me very simply. Mueller is not shooting down. Mueller does not make a deal with Flynn to get Paul Manafort. He does not make a deal with Flynn to get Jared Kushner. He does not make a deal with Flynn to get Trump Jr. Mueller makes a deal with Flynn to get Donald Trump. Period. The Flynn deal report suggests Mueller has completely assembled the backbone of his case and is now just hanging the meat from it. And just as importantly, if Flynn has merely considered a deal from Mueller, it almost necessarily means Flynn either doesn't believe he would get a pardon from Trump, or that Mueller, as I've also reported here, has succeeded in finding a way around Trump's pardon power. And
so we're going to skip ahead to the final part because we don't have all day to listen to Keith Olbermann wondering about how the world has absolved him of any duty to shout about in his mother's basement, as Hard Bastard used to call it. So we're going to look at the end here.
to the way. So I am retiring from political commentary in all media venues. This is not to say a bed of roses and reconciliation awaits us. The post-Trump America will be relieved of his prodigious evil, but in its place it will have Trump as living martyr. That prodigious evil and rank hypocrisy and immorality of his supporters, perhaps a third of us, will not vanish with him, and I'm not sure that the democracy has not been damaged too much to deal with their lawless, unprincipled rebellion, and I do not see this country's politics truly healing in the next 30 or 40 years. But at least the bleeding will be staunched, and we will have a chance to alter a phrase I heard somewhere, to make America America again. Thank you for all the kind words and all the support. Have fun storming the castle. My work here is done.
Yeah, so that was him. That was what he did. Last November, he's like, oh, the Trump's about to get impeached because Michael Flynn is about to cop a plea deal. That's what GQ was featuring. Now let's go for an update of what's actually happening with Robert Mueller. And 1 second, let me get this image here. I really have to get a handle of this OBS screen. So up until then, I'm just going to put the Torquemada image below me. So you can remember that John Greenblatt of the ADL is basically the modern Torquemada. He's a Spanish inquisitor. Don't you forget about that. So anyway, one of the Russian companies indicted by Robert Mueller has called the special counsel's bluff and is challenging Mueller's accusations in an attempt to force the release of not yet public information. Issued on March 16th, Mueller's 37-page indictment named 13 people and 3 organizations as co-conspirators in a wide-ranging scheme to interfere with the U.S. political system, including the 2016 presidential election, by way of engaging in nefarious information warfare through social media. One of those named companies is Concord Management and Consulting, LLC. Page 6 of Mueller's February indictment alleged that Concord Management has received various Russian government contracts, but stopped short of detailing or otherwise explicitly mentioning those contracts. The indictment also claims Concord Management was the primary source of funding for Russian interference operations. The document goes on to accuse the company of concealing their alleged troll funding efforts by intentionally and erroneously labeling those funds as payments related to software support and development. Now it appears Concord Management is forcefully pushing back. Bloomberg News described the firm's tactics as hardball due to the thorough and pointed nature of their questions. Politico even suggested that Concord Management's aggressive lawyering could result in an embarrassing dismissal. So let's see if there's any more questions for the moment. You guys are still hearing me, right? I do have the microphone on. See, there's just my stupid opinion is here. I saw your video from yesterday with the podcast with I think it was Aaron Ware. Just let me know if you can hear me. On Friday, Mueller's team revealed that attorneys for the company had made numerous discovery requests. Those requests, so discovery, I think, is when each party, each side of a prosecution trial gives their evidence for the other side to examine, and that's pretty much mandatory in any law setting, especially in criminal law, I believe. I mean, in civil law would probably be equally as much. We're not lawyers here, though. That should be obvious by now. On Friday, Mueller's team revealed that attorneys for the company had made numerous discovery requests. Those requests were aimed at non-public details about the government's case and underlying investigation. Mueller's prosecutors were apparently caught off guard by those requests. It's been widely assumed that no one named in the February indictment would even bother to respond to the accusations, much less fight back against them and force Mueller's team to reveal what they know. Concord Management's attorneys of record are Eric Dubellier and Kate Seekely. On April 11th, Dubellier and Seekely filed their initial notice of appearance in the case United States versus Internet Research Agency, LLC et al. The appearance was immediately supplemented with over a dozen discovery requests and a pleading for answers to 51 factual claims made by Mueller, stylized as a bill of particulars. Mueller rubbish those requests in a Friday court filing. Government attorneys Jenny Rhee, Rush Atkinson, and Ryan Dickey wrote, until the court has an opportunity to determine if Concord was properly served, it would be inadvisable to conduct an initial appearance and arraignment at which important rights will be communicated and a plea entertained. That is especially true in the context of this case, which involves a foreign corporate defendant controlled by another individual foreign defendant that has already demanded production of sensitive intelligence gathering, national security, and foreign affairs information. Specifically, Mueller's attorneys asked Trump-appointed Judge Dabney Friedrich to delay Concord Management's formal arraignment scheduled for next week. Concord Management's extensive April requests and Mueller's pleadings complaining about those requests are contained in Mueller's Friday filing. So this is on the heels of, I don't know if you guys heard about it, but Jeffrey Allen Johnson, welcome. So it's all on the heels of one of the most embarrassing things that have happened since the whole Mueller probe began. I think it was either Friday or Thursday that a federal judge started raging out at Mueller and his team over their treatment of Paul Manafort. And he started saying, well, are you here to indict somebody because of a relevant crime, or are you here to go after Donald Trump? Because if you are going after him just for the sake of doing that, it's I'm not going to. He pretty much signaled that he might throw out Manafort's case. And for those of you that are not aware, I think Jeffrey might be from Australia. I'm not sure. But here we have Larry Gerke. Welcome. How's it going? But in any case, for those of you that are not aware, the tightest case that so far Mueller has uncovered is not against Trump. It's not against Michael Flynn. It's not against Jared Kushner. And it's not even against these Russian troll farms. It's against Paul Manafort. But if that case gets dismissed, then the whole thing is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go because the whole thing depends. He's pretty much the keystone in it. And the only reason I think they even tried to get to him was because of the George Papadopoulos issue. And Papadopoulos is one of the people who pled out. He pled guilty. He's from Kansas? Okay. Are you a Jayhawk or are you a Wildcat? I want to see his answer to that. But the thing is that the investigation hinges on George Papadopoulos, who admitted to lying to the FBI. So anything he says now in a court of law will be looked at, and this is according to various people I've heard on who are legal experts. They say, well, when you have a witness who has already pled guilty to lying to law enforcement and possibly in court, their credibility in court sinks like a ship. He says Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Yeah. I think that in Kansas, it's almost unheard of that somebody's a Kansas State fan. Larry Gerke, I picked it up from Jimmy Dore, always saying howdy howdy. That's not Jimmy Dore. That's Jimmy Dore's sidekick, Ron Placone. I actually do watch that show, and I'd made a video criticizing him earlier this week. I still watch the show, though. It's not an awful show. It's just, where am I going to agree with him on things? It's not always very clear cut. There's a lot of things basically that I disagree with him on, to say the least. So, before we get to Venezuela, one last thing from the White House Correspondents' Dinner, we had So I found this through the Daily, I think it was through the Daily Caller or True Pundit, and they got it from this magazine, which is the gay paper in Washington, D.C. So this guy hosted, this dude hosted Kathy Griffin. He said, "Oh, why don't we just bring him to the award dinner?" So many people have asked why the Blade chose to invite comedian Kathy Griffin to its table at Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think everybody knows that the reason is to gain attention. The event is a celebration of the First Amendment. Okay. As a longtime LGBT civil rights advocate, a comedian, and a provocateur, Griffin has made a long and successful career out of exercising her First Amendment right to free speech. The stunt last year in which she posed with the mock severed head of Donald Trump, which needlessly led CNN to fire her from a long-standing New Year's Eve hosting gig with Anderson Cooper, was a textbook case of satire, which is constitutionally protected speech. Thus, the decision to invite Griffin proved an easy and obvious one. We also invited Stormy Daniels, but her attorney, Michael Avenatti, told me without irony that it would be too much of a sideshow for her to attend. Griffin didn't disappoint, bringing her quick wit and fearless LGBT-centric sense of humor to the dinner table. I met her and her boyfriend, Randy Bick, so somebody has to have sex with that thing, on the red carpet, and held her purse as she posed for photographers and granted a series of TV interviews. Inside the heavy purse was a stapler. It turns out she suffered a last-minute wardrobe malfunction leaving the hotel, breaking a strap on her gown. After it was repaired, she feared a repeat and asked to borrow the stapler just in case. She proved a good sport throughout the night, posing for an endless stream of selfies with mostly gay fans who congratulated her on surviving the Trump machine's attacks in the aftermath of the photo scandal. When asked how her famous mom, Maggie, is at age 96, Griffin replied, "Drunk." The only awkward moment came when Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley tried to squeeze past our table. Griffin stopped him and said, "How do you sleep at night?" Gidley replied, "Very well, thank you." When Griffin expressed doubt about that, Gidley asked, "Are we really going to do this?" That's when things got interesting. Griffin, in her trademark style, retorted, "Yes, we are. Suck my dick." "No, really, suck my dick." There was some back and forth. Then Gidley, who was holding a Tecate, announced he was, I like Tecate, by the way, if you guys haven't had it, announced he was off to enjoy his Mexican beer before we build the wall and you can't get these anymore. That prompted a farewell fuck you from Griffin, triggering nervous laughter around our table. Later, when Politico's Josh Dawsey was announced the winner of the Merriman Smith Award for his story about the resignation of White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who was seated at the table next to us, Griffin stood up and applauded loudly in his direction, eliciting guffaws from our neighbors. One personal highlight of the night, the Blade's Chris Johnson was honored as the honorable mention for the Merriman Smith Award for a story he broke in December about Trump firing all members of his AIDS advisory committee. Chris's name was called and he stood to a round of applause from the room. That would have been unthinkable 40, 30, 20, 10, or even 5 years ago, when much of the journalism and political elite of D.C. wouldn't deign to acknowledge the gay press, much less honor one of its journalists. Congratulations to Chris for his dogged work in the White House, pressing officials to address our community's issues. Another noteworthy moment came when gay country singer Ty Herndon took the podium to perform America the Beautiful and God Bless America. Unlike last year, the party drew current and former members of the administration, including Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Kellyanne Conway, Spicer, Reince Priebus, and Omarosa Manigault Newman. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein attended too, drawing curious stares from many. But the highlight of the evening's entertainment came when Michelle Wolf delivered a riotous keynote, roasting everyone from Trump and Sanders to Sean Hannity and the Democratic Party. Afterward, Griffin raved, saying she loved the performance despite some audience discomfort with an abortion joke. I was surprised by the mainstream media's depiction of Wolf having bombed and offended the room. She did what any fearless comedian would do in that moment, skewer everyone and make us laugh at ourselves, which brings us back to Griffin. Comedians occupy a unique and important role in our popular culture. We've long turned to them for incisive social commentary delivered with a sting. They say, put out loud what most of us are thinking, Attacking a comedian for doing her job as Trump and his cronies did to Griffin is petty and betrays deep insecurities. So thank you, Kathy Griffin, for making us laugh and for holding your own in the face of scorching attacks by those humorless GOP bores. So I want people to remember that after everybody said that Kathy Griffin is an idiot, and they basically the backlash after Kathy Griffin made that video and the head cutting thing had nothing to do with the First Amendment. It had to do with people saying that she's first of all, she's threatening the life of a sitting president. Okay. And she was standing there with the knife, and they want to make it like all about an art project. I want you guys to remember that when Hank Williams complained on Fox and Friends one day, I think it was in 2011, Hank Williams, here, I'll even bring it up. I mean, since this is great, since now I can just, this is what Hank Williams Jr. lost, Not for Country Boys Can't Survive, which is a great song. But this is what he lost his gig on Monday Night Football for.
He comes from country music royalty, and he's been the voice of Monday Night Football for over 20 years. But it's not all about music for this country superstar. He knows a little about politics, too.
That's right. And join us right now to break down the 2012 GOP field is country singer superstar Hank Williams Jr. Good morning to you, sir.
Hi there, guys.
Where are you?
Oh, I'm sitting here in Nashville at the little studio.
Okay, good.
Your body language says leave you alone. Your hands are
Yeah,
crossed,
whatever,
you're shaking
yeah.
us off. Okay.
Hey, since
I'd rather be up there. I'd rather be there looking at Gretchen.
Well, there you go.
Well,
Good morning to you, too. Good morning to you, too.
Yeah.
Let's just have a little
How you
intimate
doing?
discussion right here. I'd love to pick
Go
your
right
brain
ahead.
about politics.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll start with an easy question. Who do you like in the GOP race?
Nobody.
Nobody?
You remember the golf?
Sorry, microphone again. This is the guy. This is the most honest person from 2012. Hank Williams. Let me see if I can get to the part. We might have to watch the whole friggin' thing. Sorry about that.
You remember the golf game they had, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah.
Remember the golf game? That
Boehner.
was one of the biggest political mistakes ever.
Why?
That turned a lot of people off. Watching, it just didn't go over.
You mean
didn't
when
go
John
over.
Boehner played golf with President Obama?
Oh, yeah, and Biden and Kasich, yeah, uh-huh.
What did you
Yeah.
not like about it? It seems to be a really pivotal moment for you.
Come on. It'd be like Hitler playing golf with Netanyahu, okay?
Okay.
Not hardly. In the country this shape is in, the shape this country's in, I mean, no, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand
the one
that
that ma-
analogy, actually.
Well, it's...
Well, I'm
out
glad
there.
you don't, brother, because a lot of people do.
Well-
They're the enemy. They're the enemy.
Who's the enemy?
Obama and Biden. Are you kidding? The Three Stooges.
That's only
The
two.
one that makes the most sense is Herman Cain. Herman Cain makes more sense.
So
than
you
the
do
other.
have a favorite, Herman Cain of
Sorry, microphone again. Just to be clear, what he said was deemed to be so offensive to somebody that ESPN fired him from having his song featured on Monday Night Football. And it was a classic song. I think since then it's been replaced by, it might be either Carrie Underwood. I think that Faith Hills is used for NBC Sunday Night Football. But nobody talks about Hank Williams being the victim of media censorship. But that for me, that was a turning point where I realized that, no, people don't really believe in freedom of speech in this country. Even these Fox and Friends morons, Steve Ducey and Gretchen Carlson, I think she's since sued the network over the Bill O'Reilly thing. And I don't know who the third dickhead on the screen is. So that's really the state of freedom of speech in the USA, that it's corporate entities, they decide when your freedom of speech has gone a little too far. So no, Kathy Griffin got off cheap. She got fired from CNN because people would have probably not tuned into that New Year's Eve feature. People don't tune in to watch Kathy Griffin. The woman is basically too annoying for anybody to actually be in the same room with, unless you yourself are so annoying that people can't stand you. That's why she had to go with these people who are in a gay newspaper or something, the Washington Blade. Let's see what the people are saying. That guy, Bold Like a Leopard, just mentioned Ron Placone. He's a stand-up comedian I mentioned yesterday who Lionel ran his mouth against. I think Lionel made fun of him on Crosstalk, and it was I think a bit unfair to Ron Placone, even though I don't believe with Placone. Placone is actually trying to believe in something as opposed to nothing. So, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Ron Placone. I'm not sure why Lionel went off on him. I think Lionel is a little too bitter about stand-up comedians. It's like, you can criticize them, you can say that their act sucks, and in some cases their act really sucks, like with Kathy Griffin and Michelle Wolf, who are just intolerable. They're just their very voice grates on your nerves. But I'm not sure why he was so off against Ron Placone for whatever. And then I'll get back to Jeffrey's comment in a second. Catherine says it's amazing she doesn't get whiplash from claiming the moral high ground while being at the hateful and disgusting. Let me see here. Larry Gerke, I just sit back. Well, this is Jeffrey saying, I just sit back and watch Lionel's show a bit ago, full of mindless Jonesboro. Look, there's one thing, I'll tell you what. Before Lionel did his live streams, it was some of his 15 or 10-minute commentaries that got me back to thinking about doing videos. And this was 2 years ago. And I'd never done videos before. And I'd been thinking about it for a while. And Lionel has probably been a good influence. Other people, who were YouTubers who kind of gave me the inspiration to do this were Anthony Logan and you could probably say Chris Ray Gunn, although none of my work resembles Chris Ray Gunn's, for example. Or I do stuff a little more low tech than these guys, but probably a little more like Lionel. The thing that I have a problem with Lionel is, he's supposed to be somebody giving a lot of inside stuff about the law and about how things work in the court system and his opinions on the law, and that's his real forte. What does he do every single live stream and often beyond that in his own shorter videos? He'll talk about 9/11 and he'll meander into things about UFOs and about vegan eating and lifestyles and whatever, and he'll do a stream of consciousness thing. That's not what I'm tuning in for. And with all due respect, I like his stream. I still tune into it. But at a certain point you tune it out and it just sounds like background noise. It's the same thing every single day. 9/11, we have to investigate whatever, and then if he finds somebody who's a libertarian in the chat, he'll go after him. It's incoherent at times. Lionel is bitter because he failed as a stand-up. I don't think that's what it is. I think maybe he did fail as a stand-up, but not every. I'll tell you what. There used to be long ago. There were people who told me you should get into comedy and stuff like that, but I never wanted to. I never wanted to because my talent has never been something that I can turn into an act if I have any. Basically anything that I really live on spontaneity, and I'm kind of the kid who says something that, when I was in school, I was the type of kid who would say something out of the blue that would piss off a teacher. So not everybody is made for comedy. And, you guys are, I think a couple of you guys are a little pissed off at Lionel. And I wouldn't say I'm pissed off. I'm just a little tired already of the long act. And also, you send him something that you need help doing, which is an actual story you're working on, and you need help exposing, and it's like you don't exist anymore. So I love his show, and I think I always will probably keep an eye on what he's doing, because I think he offers a great point of view, even though I don't agree with it, and he's a Caleb Maupin friend, which is it's just not acceptable because the guy's a piece of shit. But I'm sorry. I am sorry. I'm tired of just meandering on about plant-based living or whatever. So I'll tune in for a half hour and then I'll go do something else. If he puts out like a more focused video, I try to catch it. So Jeffrey says Larry and I were Lionel originals. He's turned into a pretentious prick. Well, I mean, if you say so, I'm not that tied up with it. And Jeffrey also says, I'm a libertarian, Larry. Smedley went at him today with the Federal Reserve because the drone kept going after Jews in general. I don't really care. Some things that people, like there's all these people on that chat that are really, they're shit posters. So I don't really care what the chat says. I don't care about things that, some of these people that go on there and call him Zional or whatever, it's amusing to a certain extent. So Larry Gerke's trolling me now with no. I hate Caleb Maupin. That's one of the reasons that I used to do super chats to him, telling him to deport the ginger. Yeah, Caleb Maupin's an idiot, and maybe one day. Not today, because we already have enough. But I'm going to dissect one of his latest videos where he justifies Marxism and everything, and he claims, I think it was after, what was it? It was on the street somewhere. So he goes to Maupin. He goes to, here you see him going to, saying, he's shouting, socialism did not fail. Oh my God. Why is everybody saying socialism failed? I mean, I'm in Moscow, a failed country that used to be socialist. That's not the video I'm talking about. So I'll bring the video when I find it, and I'll probably do a more focused breakdown of it, because the man, Caleb Maupin, is a joke. He's a joke of a human being, and he's not a serious person, and that's coming from me. So he has this gig on RT where he's supposedly bringing reliable news. I try to be fair to RT. It's not a good credit in their column that they have Caleb Maupin working for them, or for that matter, Chris Hedges and the rest of the socialist bargain bin gang. So we're gonna move on. A couple more stories to talk about. And these are all related to history, and they don't demonstrate this. This isn't like I'm magnifying them to talk about them to the exclusion of actual current events. But this is from the Jerusalem Post. Okay, so I talked about RT. I'm going to talk about the Jerusalem Post. So they said there's new evidence that suggests that as the Jews of Europe were being slaughtered across the continent during the Holocaust, President Franklin D. Roosevelt did not want them seeking refuge on American shores. And how could he? I mean, he probably saw people like me. He's like, oh, we're gonna have people like Ramon here? Fuck that. So he said, tucked away in a secret vault inside the United States during his 12-year tenure as Commander-in-Chief, the newly revealed documents recently made public via the FDR Library paint a portrait of the president's plan to spread thin all over the world the remains of European Jewry. Among the files in Roosevelt's safe was evidence of a secret initiative dubbed the M Project, a study he commissioned that outlined options for post-war migration of the millions of Europeans, especially Jews, expected to migrate to be displaced by the war, according to Tablet magazine, which, by the way, is also a Jewish magazine. Full disclosure here, I'm not somebody who pulls the wool over your eyes, but there's still evidence of this. So if anybody wants to dispute this, please examine the papers and don't call me Zional, like some people call him. The project was first proposed in the summer of 1942 with Roosevelt enlisting the assistance of former diplomat and writer John Franklin Carter, who ran an informal and secret intelligence service for the president, along with Carter's colleague Henry Field. I know that you and Henry Field can carry out this project unofficially, exploratorially, ethnologically, racially, admixturally, miscegenationally, confidentially, and above all, budgetarily. So that's what caught my eye, this weird sentence here. FDR wrote to Carter in a secret memo authorizing the plan in July 1942. Any person connected herewith whose name appears in public print will suffer guillotinely, the memo added. So I think it was just FDR trolling his own people with that type of language. The White House plan called for Carter and Field, a trained anthropologist, to seek the assistance of academics and geographers to survey the vacant places of the earth suitable for post-war settlement, specifically in Africa and South America, and the type of people who could live in those places. Roosevelt's initial choice to lead the clandestine resettlement plan was the curator of physical anthropology at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, Aleš Krdlička. I think that's how you pronounce it. Krdlička. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's probably some sort of like Slovak name. I'm not sure. A prominent public intellectual and disciple of the eugenics theory, the science of improving a human population controlled by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics, Krdlička was convinced of the superiority of the white race and obsessed with racial identity. Roosevelt's relationship with Krdlička existed years before the presidency, with the two exchanging letters for more than a decade. The documents show Krdlička's zeal for theories on racial mixtures and notions of human racial stock, ideas that appeared to strike a chord with the president. Roosevelt asked Carter to reach out to Krdlička and convince him to lead M Project team that would study the ethnological problems anticipated in post-war population movements. Let me just see how much of this crap there is left. This is a fucking long article. You see, would Lionel go through this whole article and then curse at it in the midway through? No, he'd read through it and then he'd pretend that there was something more important. So you get full disclosure here. So gingers have no soul. Yeah, did you guys watch that Copper Cab guy? Jeffrey, look at those pics I sent him. I'm not going to. I'm not going to get in the middle between Larry and Jeffrey. Jeffrey Allen Johnson, bold. My wife is a Jew. Her grandfather came straight from the SS to U.S. Admiral. There's more to the story. Not that Hitler was a hero by any means. Listen, I mean, I don't care what you're talking about. I kind of try to ignore people in the comments that say stuff. I mean, yesterday there was a guy who called me a Nazi on one of the comments, not one of the stream comments, like one of the actual video comments, and I just laughed at him and I said, who well, very original, who gave you that criticism, or who gave you that insult? A Scottish judge? So no, I mean, I guess you could say whatever you want. I'm not going to say threaten people online or spam me, but I also don't understand what you're saying, so I don't really care. So what were we talking about? FDR. So Roosevelt asked Carter to reach out to Krdlička and convince him to lead M Project team that would study. I think we read this already. The president outlined a number of questions the study would attempt to answer, such as: is the South Italian stock, say Sicilian, as good as the North Italian stock, say Milanese? So that they're basically relating to these people as if they're salmon, salmon populations or something, if given equal economic and social opportunity. Thus, in a given case where 10,000 Italians were to be offered settlement facilities, what proportion of the 10,000 should be Northern Italians and what Southern Italian? So this is a very important. This has nothing to do. By the way, the reason I'm bringing this up has nothing to do with the Jews per se, but one of the underlying principles of why is it that people admire FDR. So Roosevelt also pointed out that while most South American countries would be glad to admit Jewish immigration, it was on the condition that the Jewish group were not localized in cities. They want no Jewish colonies or Italian colonies, etc. Keeping with this theme, the president also tasked the committee with determining how to resettle Jews on the land and keep them there. Kredlichka ultimately refused to participate in the president's plan after the White House made clear he would not have absolute control over the project. The next choice was Isaiah Bowman, president of Johns Hopkins University, geographer and outspoken anti-Semite. So I'd have to research this. Sometimes they put a little hyperbole into these. So I mean, it's not like this would be unbelievable, because there were a lot of people who simply didn't like Jews at the time. I just don't know how significant of an issue this was. Upon becoming head of the university during the Second World War, Bowman fired a number of prominent professors, believing that there are already too many Jews at Hopkins. He was also quoted as saying, "Jews don't come to Hopkins to make the world better or anything like that. They came for two things: to make money and to marry non-Jewish women." He's got us. He's got us. Game over, baby. He was also saying, he was also quoted as saying, next paragraph. He later instituted a quota limiting the number of Jewish students allowed into the school and restricted the number of Jewish students allowed to pursue degrees in the fields of science and math. Experts say Roosevelt was well aware of Bowman's prejudices, having started a correspondence with him years earlier. In 1938, Roosevelt asked Bowman to undertake a study examining how Jewish Europeans resettling in South America would acclimate to the environment. Frankly, as far as I understand, there's a lot of them down there, especially in Argentina and Chile. Frankly, what I am rather looking for is the possibility of uninhabited or sparsely inhabited good agricultural lands to which the Jewish colonies might be sent. The president wrote to Bowman, that such colonies need not be large, but in all probability should be large enough for mutual cooperation and assistance, say 50 to 100,000 people in a given area. Describing the M project to the UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1943, Roosevelt said the study is focused on the problem of working out the best way to settle the Jewish question. Oh, the JQ, adding that the solution essentially is to spread the Jews thin all over the world rather than allow them to amass in large numbers in one specific place. The conversation was recorded in the diary of Vice President Henry Wallace, who was present at the meeting. The M Project would eventually produce thousands of pages of reports, maps, and analysis examining the characteristics of multiple racial and ethnic groups and theorizing about optimal proportions in which to combine them in their new homelands. The M Project would finally be scrapped by President Harry Truman, who took over as Commander-in-Chief after Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945. Truman saw the study as a colossal waste of money, which was granted $10,000 a month. That was a fair amount of money at the time, but I don't think it was like a huge amount of money, and ordered the State Department to pull the funding soon after becoming president. A previous version of the story erroneously identified the documents to be a part of physical. Here, see, look, it should be a space part, not a part of his physical exhibit at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. That's just me being that's me being a grammar Nazi, by the way. So, let me see what you guys are talking about here. Larry remembers telling you I'm almost 80% Scottish-Irish. Lionel would also go off on 3 tangents per paragraph. Both Larry and I are good buttons, man. Pay no attention to our banter. Okay. Jeff and I started just conversing like this on Lionel's after hours chat. By the way, guys, there's an 8 p.m. Eastern time chat today with Akil Aline, who is from Quebec. He used to live here in the U.S. And we're going to be discussing, because he's Nigerian Canadian, I guess. I think he's Nigerian Canadian, and we're going to be discussing Kanye, North Korea, and Iran. So please tune in if you can. If you can't, that's also fine. I was saying that they were displacing some Jewish to the U.S. Obviously not all. Not trolling. I still don't know what you're talking about. The juice is the cause of all the world's problems. We must eliminate the juice. No, I mean OJ was acquitted, so I'm not. I think you're grossly misrepresenting the problem, Jim. So here's the three issues, and again, the Jewish part of it. I think that's why the Jerusalem Post picked it up, which is obviously they're going to be biased in terms of what angle they're going to cover it for. I mean, they have Carolyn Glick working for it, but here's a number of angles that I want to explore regarding that article. The stream is going long, but so be it. The issues I'm talking about are that FDR remains in America the icon of liberalism for everybody, but everybody who holds him in such esteem because of the New Deal, because of the Works Progress Administration here, because of the Tennessee Valley Authority, building the Hoover Dam. I think he was responsible for that. He did a lot of important projects in terms of public works in the country. I think he built the interstate highway system. So people hold him in such esteem over here and most of it is because supposedly he brought us out of the Great Depression, which is it's very much disputed in the minds of many critics of his. There's a reason that I think that this article in particular, people should look at it as an indictment of maybe his vision in the liberal mindset. Okay, so I'm not one of those people that will say, oh, because of this it proves that Franklin Roosevelt was a horrible person and he should never have been president. He was basically another Hitler. No. But think about it this way. This was a president who was basically a follower of eugenics. He was an elitist. He was basically, and this was typical of a lot of leaders of that time. And Gerke says, actually, Ike built this interstate highway system. So can you tell me, did Roosevelt start it, or was it entirely Eisenhower? Because I'm not sure about that. If you know better than me, I mean, that's fine. I'll take that as I'll just check up on it later. But he did build something that was a major transportation project of the 30s. So to be frank, bold like a leopard, he was a man of his time. Exactly. So I probably in that era, I don't know if I would have supported Franklin Roosevelt because I didn't live during the Great Depression. I didn't live during the 20s when he was. I think he was also a cabinet appointee under Wilson. I know he was governor of New York. So FDR, if you want to think of a historic character or a literary character that was most likely like him, if you've ever read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, the person that reminds me of FDR would probably be Tom Buchanan. And Tom Buchanan and people, Tom Buchanan, if you remember, was the aristocratic, young heir who was always talking about the superiority of the Nordic stock and whatever. So to say that FDR or even this Isaiah Bowman or Kridlichka, whose first name I don't remember at the moment, that they are, evil people, the way that they're tearing down statues now. I think they're tearing down a statue of one of these doctors at Duke University, or it might be North Carolina Chapel Hill. I don't remember, but they're tearing down a statue of one of these guys who experimented medically on slaves now, which not justifying anything, but tearing down the statue. What's the point nowadays? So I would never, even based on this evidence, call for tearing down the statue of FDR, even though I probably would never have supported this type of policy. And that's what, people like, I think the majority of us today in this broadcast, in this chat, believe in. We believe in a free society where even, historical figures that are undesirable, that have ideas that we would have opposed, we would not call for removing FDR's statue. I think we have one downtown here, or closer to Case Western University. I think that's an FDR statue. And even based on his own alleged hatred of Jews as well as Italians and blacks, and in that article he actually talks about Italians. and regarding them as lesser beings. FDR, the statue's built. I'm fine with it. I'm frankly, I'm not trying to fix things that have already happened, and that we can, we're not trying to build a time machine to reverse things that have already happened that we can't change. And if you are, then I'm sorry, but I don't think that's what people should be focused on. Gerke says FDR was also Secretary of the Navy. And he says, all I can say, all my family, both sides and extended, always lionized FDR. It is how I was raised. Look, I probably would not have supported FDR if you're talking about the mindset of myself today. But, there were people at the time that considered him basically the Antichrist because of his policies of vastly expanding executive power. So I think that there's certainly a lot of things you can criticize him for in terms of overreach of the executive and intervention of the government in the economy and things like that. But he was also he fought against the interventionists to enter into World War II. I think that he's a complicated figure. FDR was a New York aristocrat. Racism and anti-Semitism was commonplace then. Oh, yeah, it absolutely was. And the people that he circulated with, like Bowman, so there were people a lot like him that were very common in places of power at the time. So I mean, if this is the standard, imagine if we, if people said, Little Caesar's Pizza. I don't know if you guys still have them. We used to have this place called Little Caesar's. Julius Caesar was a horrible butcher who destroyed entire civilizations. Does that mean that we can't have Little Caesar's Pizza? No. It's ridiculous. That people have to get a perspective of what's important in life. So the other important thing about that story, and if you guys are still game, I can keep going after that. But, we have gone on for about an hour now. So the other thing important about the story is that FDR, the liberal icon, was talking about spreading immigrant populations thin, not allowing them to congregate together. So is that consistent with the modern liberal vision of immigration? Is that consistent with the way that the Democratic Party today would think of letting immigrants into this country? Because as we do know, a lot of these immigrant communities that end up being formed, in Virginia and Long Island and whatever, of Salvadoran immigrants especially. So it's a lot of Salvadorans living in proximity to one another. It's very likely FDR would have objected to that. It's very likely that that type of vision of the world today would have horrified him. So in this respect, Franklin Roosevelt was more intolerant of immigration from the third world than Donald Trump has ever been. And I think people have to keep that in mind. People have to be realistic about what being a leader of a free society is. Okay, it does not mean believing in a country where anybody can come in and do whatever the hell they want. And if you look at FDR's actual record as president, he was close to turning the U.S. into a dictatorship. He was close to destroying our democracy and turning it into an executive dictatorship. Larry Gerke brings up an important point. I think some of the issues that FDR created were perpetuated by Truman and Eisenhower, and then thereafter by other presidents. Kennedy, Nixon, certainly President Carter didn't help, and up until today, President Roosevelt, I think, did the most to hurt our democracy by increasing the bureaucracy more than any other president, and for that I'll criticize him, not for being a racist or whatever. And I think that we can change. We can trim the bureaucracy. We can get rid of some of those institutions. Those are not sacred cows. Those are things that have to be. You have to assess whether they're effective or not, whether they actually accomplish their goals. um, another thing is that one of his supporters in this whole endeavor was, let me look it up here, Henry A. Wallace. So, describing the M Project to UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1943, Roosevelt said the study is focused on the problem of working out the best way to settle the Jewish question, adding that the solution essentially is to spread the Jews thin all over the world rather than allow them to amass in large numbers in one specific place. The conversation was recorded in the diary of Vice President Henry Wallace, who was present at the meeting. So there's no actual comment in this article whether Wallace objected to it. For those of you that don't know, Henry Wallace was the even more far left vice president under President Truman, who in 1944, the Democratic Party, which was at the time not as socialistically leaning as it is today, they demanded that Wallace be replaced. They decided, no, there's no way that now that FDR is pretty obviously ill and is running for president when he very likely will die in office, they said, well, we're not going to take the risk that Henry Wallace is going to be president of the United States. So the party bosses, and this by the way, the For Real News did like a long kind of discussion about that with, I think it was Thomas Frank and Paul Jay, those of you that know who the Real News are. And they said basically, oh yeah, FDR, he would have rather had Wallace in power next to him and succeeding him to carry out socializing the USA. Well, in the end, it was the Democratic Party bosses that kicked out Wallace. He ended up having to run against Truman in 1948 and losing. And Wallace was basically a carbon, through and through socialist. He was pretty much as socialist as it got. And in 1948, he was a pro-Soviet candidate. So many people on the left here in the U.S. lament the fact that Henry Wallace was replaced by Truman. But I wonder if they would say the same thing now if they were to discover that Henry Wallace was sympathetic to this type of plan that would have, population controlled the Jews and other minorities. So this doesn't stop with the Jews. It also goes on to talk about Italians and other ethnic minorities from Europe. So I'm going to leave that topic. There's this other one, Cynthia Nixon. Everybody talks about her. She's the new candidate for governor of New York, far left candidate. It says the children of Cynthia Nixon, Samantha Bee, and Louis C.K. got into this popular public school, while hundreds of others are shut out every year. The center school has operated like a fiefdom on the Upper West Side, enrolling just 234 students. That is actually a very low number if you really think about it. 234 students in grades 5 to 8 with a mysterious admissions process that pledges diversity in race and ability, but has resulted in a school that is mostly white, affluent, and high-performing. As the Upper West Side's District 3 struggles to bring academic diversity and desegregation to the area, the center school stands out as an island of privilege. It would be exempt from the Department of Education proposal to require middle schools in District 3 to give 25% of admissions priority to students scoring at the lowest two levels on state English and math tests. The school's loophole lies in the fact that it begins admitting students in 5th grade, not 6th, as the district's other schools do. Because it is exempt from the city's admissions process, the school can cherry-pick kids who've scored higher on standardized tests, resulting in less academic diversity. It will not be a part of this particular discussion, but the superintendent is working with the center school to bring it online with the rest of the district at some point in the future, said Kim Watkins, president of the District 3 Community Education Council. The West 84th Street School is one of just, so this is in Manhattan. It's one of just 8 middle schools in the city that has its own admissions policy, but most of the others have clear guidelines for entry, such as a student's performing arts talent or a lottery system, not the center school. The process there is a mystery to the students who apply in 4th grade and are interviewed by both a current student and a teacher. Some 350 kids vie for 55 spots, and they can live outside the district. They have their completely own independent rubric, which they don't have to release or justify, said Alina Adams, an education consultant. Nobody knows how kids get into that school. One mother said during an admissions interview, her daughter was asked what her parents did for a living. Another parent cried foul over the admission process in a comment posted on InsideSchool.com. They never received our application materials. Turns out the exact same excuse was used on another family we know, it read. Those who do win a coveted spot love it. I think here's like a related article. We're not going to have time to talk about all this today. There's so much stuff to talk about, and so I mean, this is why I made like a clearinghouse. These are articles that have kind of been sitting on for the past 5 days to 1 week that I just wanted to at least mention, if not go all the way through, which we are in this case. The kids, I think, have a lot of freedom, and it ends up being an incredible happy place where your kids are learning so much all the time. I don't know what they do, but their system is incredible, said Karen Haberberg, parent of a fifth grader. The school opened in 1982 to lure kids who were fleeing to private schools. We decided that nothing really worked, so we decided to start from scratch. Elaine Schwartz, the school's 83-year-old co-founder and its current principal, said in a 2013 interview. So how is it that she's 83 years old and she's still like the principal? And how long? It opened in 1982. So this school has been open for 36 years. It has had the same principal and co-founder. What the fuck? Classes are small. Arts are a focus. Students learn Latin and attend classes with those in other grades. Standardized testing is de-emphasized. Schwartz is well connected at City Hall, according to a former parent. She's been able to kind of run this school the way she's wanted to, the parent said. I think it's a fantastic place, but I think it were much more integrated, the parent said. I wish they took many more low-income kids and kids who weren't performing well on the tests. Schwartz refused to comment. The center school has become increasingly white and affluent in the last decade. In 2008, parents, including Nixon, argued that moving the school from its location within PS 199 would result in less diversity. At the time, it was 55% white, 23% black, and 13% Hispanic, with a poverty rate of 38%. So it's gotten more and more exclusive. It's one of the whitest schools in the district, and it is increasingly white and increasingly affluent, and ousting the center school means a de facto segregated building, the ex-Sex and the City star and current gubernatorial candidate said in a hearing at the time. So I think she might actually be in favor of desegregating it. So who knows? The center school moved away to West 84th Street, where it shares space with PS9. This year, the school's population is 58% white, 12% black, 18% Hispanic, 6% Asian, and 6% other. 12% of students qualified for free lunch. So does that even add? This is 60, 78, 84, 90%. No, so 10%. Nobody even knows what race they are. So it could be that this school isn't really teaching math well. But in any case, yeah, what this exhibits, this is basically liberal school districts. They have this whole notion that, we're going to build a more equitable society where people of all races can get together. Well, in point of fact, here's a great example where that didn't happen. Here's a great example where we don't really see any equality, because this district has gotten considerably more, or actually not this district, but this school within that district of New York City schools has gotten more and more segregated and more racially monochromic or whatever. So they can't actually put into practice what they've said that they would do. This is under Mayor de Blasio, by the way, who is a friend of Cynthia Nixon. And, I'm not sure exactly how much influence he has over New York City schools. I believe they have a school board, but they also have a school comptroller who is appointed by the mayor. But I could be wrong. I don't live there, and I'm not planning to move there. We have Arjun Sinha. Sorry I'm late, but I'm reporting for duty. Welcome back, buddy. So what else do we have left? Did that one. This one I think I'll leave for a different time. They're talking about Rockford, Illinois, dealing with these PBMs. But it has Leslie Stahl, who is an idiot. Leslie Stahl is the 60 Minutes reporter who I remember she interviewed the Trump family after he got elected. I think he might have even been, he wasn't even there. So she interviewed, it was either him and his kids or it was just his kids. And she asked Tiffany Trump, who is an idiot, and nobody cares what she thinks if she's ready to be in the White House. And Tiffany Trump's like, I guess, I don't care. Like, no, this is, let me see if I can bring that up. Here, yeah, this was a dumb
Set
interview.
the scene. It's election night. Your father, no one's expecting him to win, and it begins to dawn on you. Tell us about being in that room.
You start to see the states falling. You start seeing Florida come in, and he was declared the winner. And then you saw Ohio, you saw North Carolina, you saw Pennsylvania, you saw Wisconsin. I mean, you saw these great states, they're all falling. And I think it was when we got to Pennsylvania that we knew. And it was amazing. We were high-fiving, and we were all hugging as a family. And I actually think our father was the calmest of all of us, even though he was really obviously the center of attention. So
He went quiet, is what I heard.
it's a moment I'll never forget. I can tell you that. I mean, the team was around and everybody's cheering, and it was a beautiful night.
It is hard to put into words the experience or the emotion when your father becomes president of the United States of America. We had enormous pride, joy. It's incredibly exciting, and we're very grateful for the opportunity, and we take that opportunity very seriously.
Tiffany.
I mean, I don't think we can really prepare for our father becoming president, but we were all there together with everyone that's worked so hard, and my dad has worked so hard, and it's really awe-inspiring.
At some point that night and into the next
Thanks for telling me that the audio was down. Sorry, guys. Did you? Okay, so you guys missed me saying that nobody cares. Did anybody hear me say that nobody gives a shit about Tiffany Trump? Let me just check my updates while you guys are answering. Okay, so yeah, basically 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, I'll never respect her after that idiotic interview where she asked Tiffany Trump, what's the impact of having your president elected to the White House? She's probably like, oh, I guess maybe, what she really wanted to say was she's getting more hits on her Instagram posts. And that's all. Tiffany Trump has never done anything that's really newsworthy for the broader American public. So, yeah, Leslie Stahl, she did an important report here about prescription drugs I might just save this for a different time. Looks like they had $500,000 from the city to cover the cost of two infants that were the children of city employees. So they ended up going to Canada to buy prescription drugs. Yeah, we're gonna have to dedicate something to this, like something a little longer. So no, we're not gonna talk about that today. Now, one last article before we break, because I think I covered everything. Well, let's do the Venezuela thing. So, Foreign Policy Magazine, for those of you that don't know, is a shit magazine. It does accept money from Germany. So, what was it? Hold on, let me go to my. I hope you guys don't see this on. Let's see here. Yeah, you guys can't see that. Okay, because I want to look through my mail. Sorry. Foreign Policy Magazine. Let me see if I can pop this out. Okay, yeah, here we go. You guys can see this. Welcome to Editor's Picks, FP's roundup of today's today's best articles. Now, when you get it in your email, it says presented by the Embassy of Germany in Washington, D.C. Why is Germany? So it's sponsored even. It says Merkel on Germany's G20 presidency. Okay, so the G20 must highlight advantages of trade being intensive, international, and fair in contrast to protectionist policies. That's basically, this is what Foreign Policy Magazine does. They take money from I'll say it here, globalist Germany to promote worldwide free trade of the European style. That's basically their tactic. So Tiffany damn sure isn't Ivanka. Arjun Sinha, bold like a leopard, Foreign Policy Magazine can't be worse than Abby Martin and Telesur and other places. I mean, Abby Martin's the bottom of the barrel, but I'm saying, like, in terms of biases, yeah, Foreign Policy Magazine is as bad as it gets. So, I'm just being honest with you guys. So that's why I kind of take with a grain of salt what they talk about. Encouraging a coup in Caracas will give Russia and China a foothold in the United States backyard. Really? Like they don't already have a foothold in the backyard. And then they go through this whole thing where, Rex Tillerson basically said, "Oh, let's have a coup." And Marco Rubio said, "Oh, we'd be fine with the army overthrowing Nicolas Maduro." Well, here's the fact of the matter, okay? So this guy goes to the Jack Gordon Institute for Public Policy. Let me see if I can find that one. So that's from Florida International University. Yeah, this is them, okay? This is Intelligence Fellowship, Intelligence Community Center for Academic Excellence Intelligence Fellowship Program. So this is who you're talking about. So these are people who are CIA ghouls, CIA spooks. Okay, everybody got that? Everybody understand who we're talking about here? So they're saying that coup in Venezuela would be a chance for China and Russia to collaborate on an issue far away from their own spheres of influence. If successful, it would give them greater access to Venezuelan mineral resources as well as a military footprint in Latin America. China would likely be a silent underwriter, as it has been hesitant to openly challenge the United States and Latin America so far. Still, Beijing could provide much-needed political and economic support. Russia might flex its muscles more flexibly. Both would likely avoid sending troops to support a military regime in Venezuela. However, there could be an increase in arms and equipment transfers, technical training, and Russian security contractors on the ground in Venezuela, much like what Russia has done in Syria. At the moment, there is no indication that Russia, China, or Cuba, together or independently, are calling for a coup in Venezuela, but the United States is. U.S. policymakers should think twice before ceding space in the region to Washington's geopolitical rivals. A coup would not only pose a strategic threat, it would also harm U.S. economic interests. If a military regime propped up by Russia or China emerges in Venezuela, then it's likely that the last remaining U.S. oil companies operating in Venezuela, namely Chevron and Halliburton, would be forced out and replaced by Russian and Chinese firms. Oh, so that's what's important to keep. What's really important here is to keep Halliburton and Chevron in business there. But by the way, those of you that don't know, Chevron had 2 of its employees arrested in Venezuela a couple weeks ago. So without the coup, are they going to stay? Is that what's going to happen? Because I don't think that it's really going to be a beautiful picture there coming up. It hasn't been for a while. And what this article does is it puts the interests of U.S. oil companies ahead of the welfare of the Venezuelan people. Listen, if you know anything about the past of Venezuela, Chavez, yes, he came to power in a democratic election. Before that, he attempted to overthrow the government in a military coup in 1993, and he was arrested for it. So there's absolutely no no justification for saying, oh, we'd be overthrowing a democratically elected regime. That first of all, the democratically elected regime has been basically imposed. Oh crap! I think I'm getting some bad news. Oh, this is good news. Okay, you guys are gonna be back on Steemit. All of you who aren't on Steemit, by the way, get the fuck on Steemit. It's very important that we all be on Steemit because it's basically the best way for me to blog and collaborate with people. I'm getting more growth in Steemit than anywhere else. Is it organic growth? I don't know. I really don't know, but it's better than the other places where I'm sharing stuff. So yes, join Steemit. A lot of important news about Venezuela comes out on Steemit and Nicaragua. And before we go on to the next topic, which is hopefully I won't take too long with, I want to say this. I would have been glad if there would have been a popular uprising or a democratic revolution in Venezuela that would bring down the Maduro regime. It doesn't look like they're going to let that happen. And for the shills at Foreign Policy magazine, the German shills that are saying, oh, this could be a problem because Venezuela could fall into Chinese and Cuban hands. I'm sorry, they already are in Chinese and Cuban hands. They already do have undue influence in that country. It's not something that is a future situation. It's something that would be probably 2 or 3 years in the rearview mirror, possibly even more. If you talk to somebody like Carlos, who I've had on this show, those countries do control the economy of Venezuela, Russia, Iran, China, and others. And they did great moves to do it. And I guess to their credit, they seized control of the economy of one of the largest oil exporter in the world at the time, but it hasn't helped Venezuela. And even in my opinion, the imposition of a foreign regime that's not American would be of better benefit to the people of Venezuela at a certain point than the crap that's going on right now. It's unfortunate, and there's nothing I can do to change it. And watching it from afar, I just hope something like this never happens here, because we're really talking about a country that had all the blessings that God could give it, squandering everything in the name of equality and Marxism. And for that, I see you guys talking about Abby Martin in the chat, Larry and Arjun. If I said everything that I think and feel about Abby Martin on this channel, I'd probably be banned. I think she's pretty much human garbage. I wish, I would never wish openly ill upon people if it got me banned on YouTube. In this case, I might just make an exception. I think she's an awful human being. She and her I think it's her husband or her boyfriend, they tour the world. They highlight all of this so-called oppression and abuse, and yet they work for one of the most abusive and corrupt and evil governments that has been in power in decades. They're not independent. They have the option of going independent and presenting their news. I think, there's maybe I'm wrong, but who do they take their salary from? They take their salary from Nicolás Maduro. They take their salary from Telesur, which is largely controlled by stock from Venezuela and other governments that are in Venezuela's ALBA pact. So I think she's a horrible person. I think that she's no better than the shills on CNN or on any of these other networks that are manipulated by ties to governments. And she yes, do I listen to some of her broadcasts and nod about, with certain points she makes? Yes, I think that she is pretty much the personification of dog shit on the internet. Larry Gerke says they just provide her a platform, right? And so does if you want to put it that way, the CIA provides a platform for Anderson Cooper. She is total garbage, and the fact is, Anderson Cooper, I don't watch his show either. Who's the other person who's a big piece of crap? Joy-Ann Reid, whatever her name is. Those people are all on the same pedestal. Joy-Ann Reid, Anderson Cooper, Abby Martin is just this. She's the same thing. It's just a different logo. They just provide her a platform. No, when they give her actual monies that are from the Venezuelan state budget, when Venezuela is going bankrupt and people are starving because the only source of food and basic necessities is the Venezuelan government, she is literally evil incarnate, in my opinion. Maybe I'm making a moral judgment, and maybe I know we strive not to do that on this show. With respect to her, I really can't. I think she's basically as bad as it gets. There's other people who work for RT, for example. That I think RT is not exactly great. I think people demonize it too much. I'd say, I think last week, I don't know if you guys watched it. Larry, you might have been there. I talked a little about state-owned media. And, I actually used the example of China's CGTN. And China is the country that I consider personally the worst threat to U.S. national security and the world existent on the stage today. Worse than any other country. They are the biggest danger in terms of pollution, in terms of the way they manipulate world economies, in terms of all the problems that they create. China still has one of the more quality news services in the world, CGTN. They present fantastic news. They do it very professionally. Telesur and Abby Martin are literally the bottom of the barrel. They are trash. They are political propaganda, totally. They don't present news at all. They present garbage. CGTN, and I, this is where I talk about this issue. CGTN is the mouthpiece of the world's greatest threat in terms of the environment and health and also national security. China, I've always talked about being the worst threat to U.S. national security, but I still give credit to CGTN. If I watch a CGTN report, I still think that there's something worth watching there. Abby Martin is total garbage. Abby Martin works for a country that has lost all credibility. And, Larry's saying here, laughing, for taking her fee, oh, she doesn't have any credibility. Yes, this is a woman that she says that's like saying a lawyer who defends a criminal is as reprehensible as her client. No, what she does is she will go around the globe, go to Palestine and Israel, and complain endlessly about injustices over there. She could do the same thing within her own hemisphere. She could go to Nicaragua, look at the people rioting there. More people are dying in Nicaragua than are dying in the current unrest over in what's it called, on the Gaza fence. Arjun Sinha says, nope, bigger threat is Pakistan. China still follows some rules, but Pakistan is off the rails, whether U.S. or no. I mean, look, Arjun, I also respect your opinion. I think China is a much worse threat than Pakistan, and I say this not because I hate China. I always say I don't hate China. I don't hate the people of China. I think China is one of the greatest civilizations in the world, but in terms of their pollution, and in terms of their effect on the world economies and their effect on the labor market and their effect on world health and their effect on U.S. national security, because they do have a very sophisticated spying apparatus, it's 100%, it's China. It is. China is the worst threat to national security here in the U.S., and it's the worst threat to stability internationally. And that's my opinion. And like I said, the point being here is that I believe that there are state media that you can read and you can say, oh yeah, this is a very interesting and useful news source, and CGTN in China and RT in Russia, and to some degree, I would say Deutsche Welle in Germany. You'd probably take some Latin American outlets. Univision is kind of on the border. I'm not crazy about them. I don't think that they're state-owned. But I'm just trying to say that when you say a state outlet is garbage because it's loyal to a state, I think you're making a broad generalization. That's what they do to RT. However, Telesur is, if you look at their, let's just look at it, okay? Larry thinks I'm being unfair to Telesur. So let's look at some of their headlines here. So President Maduro receives Palestine President Abbas. Okay. U.S. Embassy road signs installed in Jerusalem. And then there's stuff about Nicaragua, vandals carry out attacks on families during vigil. Then let me see here. What's a good example? Okay, here we go. Venezuela's no apostrophe. Okay, National Electoral Council tests electoral system. Okay, let's see if we can find an article, though. Their articles are like basically trash. I think that they can't pay for editors anymore. Larry Gerke says, I will concede this, bold like a leper. I was very disappointed when Abby left RT for Telesur. I agree with your assertion that RT is by... no, RT, it's an insult to RT to compare them in any sentence to Telesur. Telesur is literally human shit. They're garbage. I'm not going to, I try to be fair in many, I'm fair to Jimmy Dore. I'm fair to Dennis Kucinich. I'm fair to a lot of people on the left where I don't want to be fair. I'm not going to make that distinction with Telesur. They are the pinnacle of dog shit. They're absolute crap, and I'm not going to pretend that I give them any respect. Here, black Jamaican woman asked to get off German airplane, cites racism. She said a German-speaking woman instructed the flight attendant to call the pilot, who then instructed her to get off the flight. A black woman from Jamaica living overseas has claimed she experienced a racist incident aboard German airline Condor. Sharon Roch, a citizen of Switzerland who was visiting the island for her grandmother's funeral, told the Jamaican Observer that was the first time she experienced such a serious act of racism at the hands of an airline employee. Roch said she boarded a flight at Jamaica's Sangster International Airport Wednesday en route to Germany, where she was to catch her second flight home to her home in Geneva. After boarding the plane and finding her seat, which was by the window, Roch said, I sat down in my seat where there was a group of 5 white ladies traveling together. One of them was about to sit beside me, but then refused, marking that she does not want to sit with this black woman and that she would never sit with the black woman. Roch further claimed the woman, who was speaking German, instructed the flight attendants to call the pilot. After the Caucasian pilot was summoned, he instructed Roch to get off the flight. They are telling me to get off, and I refuse because I paid for my flight and I know where I am going. I'm a Jamaican. Why are they in my land? I have my rights here too, she added. So, a couple reasons why I doubt this. These women went on a tour of Jamaica. So why would they be so adamant not to sit next to a black woman if they were just in Jamaica for a week or whatever? Paul Stanton, superintendent in charge of the Sangster International Airport Police, when contacted by the Sunday Observer, relayed a counter-narrative that the airplane was dealing with an unruly passenger. We were told that she was not behaving properly, and that is a common call we get almost every day. Unruly can mean that they are cursing and are not abiding by the instruction of the flight crew. Under the Civil Aviation Act, they have the power to ask us to remove passengers from flights, Stanton said, according to the Jamaican Observer. So this is Jamaica. This isn't like American white people disputing her claim. It's the Jamaican government. Upon inquiry, Roch said that the Condor's Airlines Germany office had no information of the foul play, that the airline had taken a passenger off the plane. In Germany, my auntie went to Condor and they said they didn't hear of somebody being taken off the flight, Roch said. She visited the Kingston head office of Inter-Caribbean Airways Thursday, where she spoke with 2 representatives from Condor Airlines who said they knew nothing of the incident and encouraged her to explore her legal options. They called in Montego Bay. They didn't have a report, so they said they don't know where to go from there, she said, the Jamaica Observer reported. On Friday, when she returned to the office, her report was faxed to Germany and she spoke with her consultant in Switzerland, explaining her dilemma. I spoke with a representative and he instructed me to get out of here now, Roch said. The airline wasn't able to find her a spot on the airline, which travels to Germany Wednesdays and Saturdays. So they're basically, this is Telesur's reporting. They're relying on the testimony of one witness in Jamaica who's claiming that she was kicked off of a flight with no corroborating evidence. Let me see if I can find a different report. So let's see. Condor Airlines, I don't think is actually German. I might be wrong. I know we're going. Yeah, it is German. You know, it's. I think it's even a. It's a luxury airline. So this is from the Jamaican Observer. Let's see. Let's compare the quality. A black Jamaican who lives overseas is fuming over what she regards as the door of racial victimization being opened to her by Germany-based airlines Condor. The woman Sharon Roch, who is in the island for her grandmother's funeral, said it was for the first in all her travels that such a serious act of, quote, racism had been meted out to her by an employee of the airline. Roch, who is now a citizen of Switzerland, told the Jamaica Observer that last Wednesday she boarded her 9:25 p.m. flight at the Sangster International Airport in Monaco Bay, St. James, en route to Germany, where she would catch her second flight to her home in Geneva. After boarding the plane and finding her seat, which was by the window, usually the most sought-after position by travelers, she noticed a group of white women who were also traveling. I sat down in my seat where there was a group of five white ladies traveling together. One of them was about to sit beside me, but then refused, remarking that she does not want to sit with this black woman, that she would never sit with this black woman. Raj said the woman could be heard speaking German when she instructed the flight attendants to call the pilot. That was when things took a dramatic turn, Raj said, as the Caucasian pilot, after being summoned, instructed Raj to get off the flight. An aggrieved Raj told the Sunday Observer that at this time she noticed security guards were also waiting to take her off the plane. I didn't get off because I didn't know what I did. So I again asked, what is the situation? Can you explain it to me? It was at that point that security guards intervened and asked passengers who were seated behind her if they were having issues, but they replied that they did not. The women who, according to Raj, were black were eventually moved to the front of, and then the pilot returned. Who are they talking about? So first it says that she said that they were white. 5 white ladies. Now it says that they were black. They moved them up to the front. So see here. This is incoherent. You see that? They moved up to the front because the white women didn't want anyone down there because they need just them to be in the back to she said, knowing that the white women got up and sat where the other black women were removed from. This, Raj said, was indicative of just how much the white women insisted that she would not fly beside her. Despite the white women moving, the pilot still demanded that Raj get off the flight. I began speaking in French, and then the pilot said, don't speak to me in French because I don't speak French. So I said, okay, let me speak English. I get to the point and I say, what is the problem? So why would she start speaking in French? This is a German flight. And, they're in Jamaica. What does French have to do with it? This is very strange. It could be because she lives in the French part of Switzerland. Adamantly, she said she continued sitting as they were still unable to tell her why she should leave. They are telling me to get off and I refuse because I paid for my flight and know where I am going. I am a Jamaican. Why are they in my land? I have my rights here too, she expressed. The police were called in, and an exasperated Raj said she decided to just leave with them. She said that whilst making her way off the plane, however, she asked the law enforcers for the reason for her leaving. They said they don't have a report against me. They didn't understand nothing. They just heard to get a lady off the flight. So this is Jamaica. So there's very incomplete information on this from both the Observer and Telesur. The question is, why did Telesur decide to run a story about a random passenger getting kicked off a flight in Jamaica? It's not as if. So in the grand scheme of things, why is that a big deal? Nobody's starving in Jamaica, or not nearly as many people are starving in Jamaica as are starving in Venezuela. So yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about this matter with Telesur. There was another article where it was basically garbage. Here they're doing U.S. Embassy road signs installed in Jerusalem. So, of all the stories that they can cover, they all appear to be taking place. Let's read this, okay? U.S. Embassy road signs went up in Jerusalem Monday ahead of next week's opening of the mission in accordance with President Donald Trump's recognition of the city as Israel's capital. So then they're interviewing these Palestinians. So let's watch this video. So they're watching, you see these people rioting, slingshotting. You don't see anybody in the distance. Okay? You don't see any fence here. What are they doing? They're mugging for the camera. That's what they're doing. They're not actually. Do you see anybody in the distance? I don't see anybody. You see power lines? There's no way to know if there's any return fire because you can't hear the actual volume. There's just people standing in a crowd. So that in my opinion, Telesur is openly propaganda for certain sides in world conflicts, and that's why I think that they're garbage. You look at that story. The U.S. embassy moves to Jerusalem. What do they feature? Random rioting in a apparently unpopulated field somewhere where we don't even know. What does that have to do with anything? So, if you're asking me why I think Telesur is garbage, you can look at any one of their articles and you wonder what ties this to another thing. What really is the coherence here? You can criticize Israel, that's for sure. There's fine things to criticize every country for. But when you produce news that's basically, incoherent, nobody knows what there's so many non sequiturs. Oh, well, people are rioting. Why are they rioting? Because of offense or because of an embassy. Well, why are they rioting in an open field in the middle of nowhere where there's no soldiers that appear in the distance? Oh, we'll cover that tomorrow. That's basically that's why Telesur is a garbage news outlet. They're complete trash. They're worse than CNN. What is your opinion about Al Jazeera? Look, I'll say there's certain things on Al Jazeera that are very interesting and they do pose like a good they pose good questions, and I think they do have high quality journalism at some levels. At some levels, Al Jazeera is a quality. Al Jazeera and even Press TV, which is much more biased than Al Jazeera. They're Iran's English language TV station. They're not unreadable. They're not incoherent crap. But they have an editorial line that I think is wrong. But that you could expand that to all across the world. There's magazines and TV stations with editorial lines that I disagree with. I'm sure if I look at CBC, which is where Jim So's from, Canada Broadcasting Channel, there are certainly issues that I would have with CBC's editorial line as well. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about both quality and we're talking about factual verification. And with Telesur, you're really talking about the bottom of the barrel. There's very few organizations where I'll basically call them, over and over again, basic trash. I think somebody's horn is honking outside. But, two of them are Telesur and Rolling Stone. I think they're both complete trash. And I don't believe, I always comb through what their reports and they're just garbage. It says the western side of the city is part of the widely accepted territory of the State of Israel, which was founded in 1948 after the end of the British Mandate for Palestine. The Palestinian leadership and most of the international community consider East Jerusalem as occupied territory and the future capital of a sovereign Palestinian state. So when they say widely accepted, I'd like them to know, who disputes that the western part of Jerusalem is part of Israel? Because according to the United Nations, it is. The dispute is over the eastern side. The dispute is over, territories captured in 1967. So it's not widely accepted. If it's widely accepted that it's part of the state of Israel, then you shouldn't have any problem with countries relocating their embassy to the western side of the city. The fact of the matter is that Telesur and a lot of the Arab nations' propaganda, they don't believe that the state of Israel should exist, and they're not. They kind of play a coy game about it, unlike other nations like Iran, who I think Iran would be more open about it. But these countries, they say, oh, it's widely accepted that it's part of the state of Israel. The fact of the matter is that there's never been any dispute about Western Jerusalem. You can comb through any records, and the last time that there was a dispute was in the 40s, and that was settled by the United Nations. They said that there would be an armistice line, and that it would be part of the new state of Israel, and that's it. And for some reason, people who all the time wave the UN around and say, oh, the UN condemns this, the UN condemns that. Well, the UN ruled on this, and they still don't accept it. So what does the UN's word matter? Nothing. It's a complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit. You can go around the world. There are few places where there's this type of double standard. I think I'm done here. 8 p.m. we're gonna have Akil Aline talking to us, and then we'll. Where's that? Second. How do I end this? Here we go. So we're gonna have Akil Aline coming on at 8 p.m. talking about Kanye West. Very different take on it than I do, but he's a good-spirited debater. I think he's actually a lawyer too. So maybe if you have questions about Donald Trump, we can pose it to him. I don't know if he'll answer them, but that's it. Have a good rest of your day.